Okay, today is Friday, April 23rd, 2021. We are interviewing Bill Godburn virtually over WebEx. The interviewers are Jillian Maynard and Brian Motzke, working with Central Connecticut State University. Also
Hey,
present, also present are Kelly Clavette and Kathy Batista. So with that being said, we would just love it if you could share your story with us. Maybe you can start by talking about how you ended up enlisting or were you drafted?
I was drafted. I turned 18 January 30th, 1943. And on February 8th, I got a call that I was drafted. It's not even a month after turning 18. And I had to report to Camp Devens. But when my memory on a lot of things is shot. So I think I was picked up by a troop train that picked up other guys, and that we went up to Camp Devens, where I was inducted. If you want to know the stuff that went on there, I can go further. When I got there, they lined us up, and on each side of us, they gave us shots for everything. And that night I was so sick, I was running the temperature and all. Then the next day, they run us through the clothing chute where some guy looked at us and he gave us our uniform. I don't know how he did it, but everything fit. And so that started that. Then they gave us a test at Camp Devens. And I don't remember what the test was. It was kind of like an intelligence test, okay? And then I don't know how many days I spent there. It wasn't many. And they had us line up and we had to go through a gate. And they'd take so many along and then the gate closed. And I found my neighbor was just in front of me and the gate come, I wanted to be with him, but he was gone. And then when the gate opened up, I was with another group. The next thing I know, I was on a troop train, and we went from Camp Devens right through Meriden. It was the last time I saw the city and the traffic tower in town where it used to be. And I ended up at the boardwalk in New Jersey. It was taken over by the United States Army Air Corps. And that's the first time I knew I was in the well, it wasn't Air Force, it was United States Army Air Corps. It was still part of the Army because it didn't become the Air Force until 1947. So we went to the boardwalk where we had our basic training, and we did our marksmanship, hiking with the packs, but it was not on the boardwalk. It was in that sandy beach, and that was tough walking. We all of us tried to get near the water where the sand was hard, you know, but we had to do our 20 miles with a pack, and I'll tell you something how tough it can be. About the only time I remember crying, I was in bed. I was running a terrible temperature. And the sergeant come in, and I said, Sarge, I'm sick. He felt my forehead. He says, stay in bed. And he says, when you feel up to it, go to the dispensary. I said, great. So later on, I got up. It was pouring, cats and dogs. And I must have walked 5 miles, I think, down to the dispensary. I got there, and they took my temperature. It was, I think, 102. He said, gave me an aspirin, and he says, go back and go to bed. I walked all the way back in the rain, and I got back there and I cried, just cried. I felt so sorry for myself. The only time I cried, but that was my thing. When I had to go on the rifle range, it was duck soup because when I was 16, I used to hunt, and my dad showed me how to use the gun and all. And Dad always pointed out to me, make sure you see your target before you pull your trigger. And I did, I learned that. So when I had target practice there, hit the bullseye was nothing for me.
We'll ask you more. We'll ask you.
Go ahead. That was basic training. Okay? You want me to go on?
Well, how long were you at basic training? And,
Or 30 days. 30 days.
Just 30 days.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after that, where did you go?
Believe it or not, they sent me down to the University of Southern Mississippi to school. And I went there, and they had me studying Army administration. Don't ask me how long I was there. I don't remember. All I know is I passed. And I don't think I ever used it after I left there. But I met my wife there. And I forgot how long we were there. But eventually, I took her out a few times to movies, and we sat around the pool and stuff. And besides studying, we had to do guard duty there too. But anyway, I forgot how long the course was, but I passed it with no problem. And after that, I don't know whether I went to the air base at Mobile, Alabama, or to the bomber base at Dyersburg. It might have been the bomber base at Dyersburg, because I had a friend of mine that was in the antique veterans with me, who was colonel, and he was a co-pilot on a B-17. And I don't know, he was at Dyersburg, but I don't know if he and I were there at the same time. But, and I don't remember much of what I did there. Having probably, I guess, I had to do some driving with jeeps and weapons carriers for one thing or another, like errands and stuff. And then from there, I got transferred down to Mobile, Alabama. And when I got down to Mobile, I would go up and visit my wife, who lived in Oxford, where the University of Mississippi is. And I was only I was in the service less than a year. And last time I went up there, I don't know how it came about, but we got married, and the next day I had to leave. I got back there, and they shipped us up to the fort in New Jersey. What the heck was the fort? I forgot the name of the fort. It's still there in New Jersey. And from there, they put us on the Queen Mary, and I was on what they call the promenade deck, which was an exclusive deck, but it wasn't. They converted to Queen Mary. We had 20,000 troops on that thing when we left. I remember standing at the railing, and we went by the Statue of Liberty. I felt I could almost reach out and touch it. And the next thing I know, we were out in the ocean. And it took us 4 days, 18 hours to get to Scotland. We landed in Glasgow, Scotland. When we got there, it was very foggy. And I stood at the railing, and as the fog lifted, I looked down, and I saw a little boat like that. It was a British submarine, but you're so high up. Yeah, God, on the promenade deck, you must be 30 feet above the water. But then when the fog fully lifted, you know what I saw? A British aircraft carrier burning from stem to stern. I couldn't believe a metal ship burning the way that was. I'll never forget it. And then they brought ferries over and transported us on a train. And from the train, all the Scottish people, they were so nice, man. And a beautiful city, Glasgow. So we pulled out of there, and the Scots are playing their bagpipes and all. You know, we felt great. That's how I'm 18 years old. So we went down to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge, England. And went to a fighter base. And I think it was Duxford, but I'm not sure. And I was there, we got there at nighttime. I was there maybe 4 hours, and it's the only story I'm going to tell you. I was there, the captain, the OD come around, he says, Billy, I'm going to put you on a 50 caliber anti-aircraft gun. I said, okay. So he put me on it. Normally on a 50 caliber, the ammunition box is attached to the gun. Okay, but this ammunition box was on the ground, and this 50 caliber, I had to stand up and I had a spade grip. You know, you pull back the charger, and I had to put on earphones. The officer today said to me, he says, Bill, you don't fire this unless we tell you. Well, they brought some kid around. I don't know who he was. I don't know his name. I don't know anything about him, but he was supposed to feed the ammunition. Well, as things would have it, the German plane come over, and there was a hell of an explosion, and then a second one. On the first explosion, the kid ran away. I'm there all alone waiting. I'm wondering how the hell I'm going to feed the ammunition and fire that gun. Well, the officer today come around, and he says, where's the guy I put on to feed the ammunition? I says, Captain, as soon as that first explosion, he took off. I don't know where he went or what, but I was left standing there for an hour on that gun. I wish they'd told me to fire it. I think I could have hit the son of a gun. I was a pretty good shot. So anyway, I don't know what happened to the kid. And I'll tell you this much that I learned in administration. You leave your post in time of war, you can be shot. But the last I heard, and I don't know if it's true or what, they sent him back to the United States. So he could have been in serious trouble. Though I couldn't tell you who he was, anything about him, because I was only with him about 30, 40 minutes before that German plane come over. And then the rest of my time there wasn't long. But I'll tell you, I was out on the airstrip, and this most of the fighter pilots were my size because the cockpits aren't that big. And he come in, and he was coming in too high in a P-47, and he couldn't give it the gun to get up in the air again, so he had to land. But at the end of the strip was bushes and everything in the ditch, so he had to put on his brakes, and it nosed up. And I saw what was happening. I got on a bicycle, and I raced down there and climbed up on the wing, and I unstrapped the safety harness and all. Man, he was shaking like a leaf. I said, Lieutenant, you okay? He says, yeah, I'm fine. We got him off. By then, the ambulance come down and everybody, we got him off, and that was that. Another incident that happened there, I don't know who the officer was, anything about him, but he took off in a P-47. And I don't know what the reason was, but all of a sudden he went into a dive. He come down, plowed right into the strip. We got there, and there wasn't much. But anyway, I found his wallet. It was all crushed up. So I gave it to the officer today. I said, I don't know what you want to do with it, but here it is. And I don't know, I don't remember much about the pilot at all. But that was my experience there at Cambridge. Then after that, they sent me to headquarters. And there I did a lot of different things. But this one probably interests you. I was in London a lot, and I went through so many air raids. Well, one day I had to drive from the headquarters into the center of London. You ever see the Tower Bridge in London, in the Parliament there? Well, I went by Parliament, the Big Ben, and I drove over the Tower Bridge, and I had to go down to where the longshoremen would work, and it was around noon hour, and the Germans come over. It must have been 400 or 500 planes, and they bombed the hell out of that place. And I had a friend of mine from Minnesota. I drove a weapons carrier there. I don't know what I had to pick up or what, but the bombs were, I jumped in a pit with a bunch of English longshoremen. I tried to light a cigarette and I'm shaking like a leaf. And the longshoreman, he says, here, what did he say? Here you go, chap. You need a light? And I said, yes, I need a light. So the guy was supposed to help me. He sat in that Jeep, weapons carrier, all through that raid. I don't know how he survived. I stuck my head up a few times. I said, Gene, come on, get down here. Well, his wife was giving him a hard time. I don't know what his problem was, but I think he wanted to get killed. He damn near did. But anyway, when the thing ended, so one time I was scared skinny because I shook, and it was a hell of a raid. And they were all 500-pounders. I don't know how many planes there were up there, but the next time I was in a hospital and I was getting discharged from the hospital. I was in there for some reason, and there was a German raid, and the hospital was Quonset huts, and there was a lot of these Quonset huts around. And I was sitting in the weapons carrier, and then the sirens went off, and there was a raid coming on. Well, I'm sitting there, and figured, what the heck? It was just not far out of London, and I saw a bomb coming in, so I fell on the driver, and he was sleeping, and that thing went off. Oh my God! It must have been and the concussion, it bothered me. It bothered my breathing. So what happened, 3 of the hospital collapsed from the concussion. So he poked me like this and said, come on, let's go. I was stunned. So we went there, tried to, rescue. Nobody was killed. Nobody. I couldn't believe it. And so when things cleaned up, we left there. And I'm trying to think of but those are 2 of the raids but there was others. I remember one other raid. I stood outside on the streets of London. The German planes come over and they're bombing the hell out of the city. And a lot of the 90-millimeter guns were in Hyde Park. They had them row on row. A lot of them were fired by English women. And they hit one German plane that blew up. I mean, God, it blew up. And then another one. But I think it was nighttime, so I didn't see anybody parachuting out. But I remember the planes they shot out of the sky. And what goes up must come down. All that crap from those shells, it's dropping all around us. So that was that. And I went through some of those and I managed, but the second time I come under fire, the only thing that went through my mind is whether I was going to live or die. But I'm telling you, I wasn't scared. I really wasn't. I was proud of myself. So I went through a lot of that, but those are some of the significant things that I remember. Probably the next thing I could tell you is I got transferred from the 8th to the 9th, and most of my flying was on a C-47. I never forget flying over the channel and looking back at the White Cliffs of Dover. It was the prettiest sight you could ever see. You ever look at a piece of chalk? That's the way the White Cliffs of Dover look. Absolutely beautiful, high cliffs and all. And then you're flying over, you could see some of the B-17s that were shot down, all the bombing and all the stuff that went on D-Day, June 6th, and all the crap there that was, shot up. And we landed in Nancy, France. And in Nancy, France airstrip, we were in a 474th Air Service Group. And we would put 14, you know what a 50-gallon drum is? We'd put 14 of those on the C-47, and we'd put them side by side, and we'd put 14, that's 700 gallons of gasoline, and I'd tie them in the center of the fuselage up against the bulkhead, and we'd take off with that. And when we were in, Nancy was here as example, and Patton was down here in Metz. And Metz, France was a fortified city. Well, that's when the Battle of the Bulge was going on. And Patton was making his move from Metz up to Belgium to the Battle of the Bulge. So I don't know what a tank gets on a gallon of gas, but we flew those drums up forward so the tanks could refill and get there, because we were only about probably a mile behind the front lines, and the air. You'll think I'm crazy, but the Germans, they were walking around Nancy with their rifles on their shoulders. Nobody wanted to bother with them. I went to a church on Christmas in Nancy, and there were German soldiers there, Americans and French. They were singing in German, singing in English. Nobody bothered them. Who cared? And they wanted to give up. Nobody would take them. They had their hands full with prisoners. So anyway, we could see truckload after truckload of German prisoners coming by our strip. And there was a MP on a motorcycle driving them. Who was driving the German prisoners? Italian prisoners. I'm telling you the truth. And I had an Italian kid in my outfit. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, there's two I remember. Jimmy Outlaw, who was a Cherokee Indian, and he kept in touch with me after the war. He begged me to come out to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I didn't want to go. My wife sure didn't want to go. And there was a Apache Indian in the outfit too. And he was a little guy. And they were the two I remember. But my closest friend was Red Simpson from Macon, Georgia. We were close. I think I was a better shot than him, though. So anyway, this caravan of 6x6 trucks were coming by with Italian drivers, the prisoners, and they hit an American soldier. He was a Jewish kid, a hell of a nice young guy. The Italian kid and the Jewish kid were like, God, they were as close as brothers could be. Well, they hit him, and the trucks kept going. So they finally caught up with the convoy, and the truck that hit this Jewish kid came back. I'll never forget it. It's the funniest thing I ever saw. But the Italian kid, he saw that Italian driver. He ran down there. He was so mad. He grabbed the door. The Italian driver jumped out. He ran down the street. The Italian American, he couldn't catch him. I'll tell you, there's some funny things that happened. So anyway, after that, it was getting close to the end of the war, and I flew up to when the war ended, I was in Schweinfurt, Germany. And I can tell you this, I didn't know it at the time, but I had my English relatives was kind of English and Irish combination, but my mother's side was all German. I didn't, at 18 and 19, I didn't know I had relatives still in England, but I didn't know I had relatives in Germany. And here we're bombing them back into the Stone Age. And as God is my judge, I only saw one city in Germany that I saw that was still standing, and that was Heidelberg. And the only thing there was a river that ran through. The bridges were hit, but I remember the dead stuff I saw floating down the river. And but Frankfurt, Germany, all of those cities and towns were absolutely, it stunk because there were dead people under all that stuff. So in Schweinfurt, it was out in farm country, and there was a German family that I met. Between my lousy German and I got to speak French pretty good. He was a World War German soldier. So I met him, and his wife would do my laundry for me. Otherwise, we had to do our own. And I'd sneak him food, which we weren't supposed to do. And little kids would come up starving with little peach cans and a wire over, begging for food. But I didn't eat. I'd give it to them. Some of the GIs would show it to them and throw it in the garbage pail. I never did that. We didn't make war on women and children. So what we did is we were flying American POWs out of Germany. Not only Americans, but all nationalities. And I remember some French Algerians from Africa that we flew out. They had shaved heads with a little knot. God, they scared the hell out of me. But we were flying some of them out. But there was one kid I remember that was so thin. Most of the POWs, you got to remember, American air operations started in August of 1942. I got there in 43. When I first got at that airstrip, there was only 6 planes on it, so they were still building up. I also drafted missions, which was something that when I was at headquarters, they need to have somebody do it. There was a guy that was better than me, but he got sick and couldn't do it. And they asked me. I said, yeah, I can do it because I had it in high school. And so I drafted missions, which you had to give to the pilots. It told them what their bomb load could be. Some units would fly up to Norway, and they'd call that a green flag. They wouldn't carry anything. It was a decoy. And then you'd have a red mission and a blue mission, and they'd be flying to different cities. And so what they tried to do is get all the fighter planes in France on the shore and go after that unit going towards Norway. And when they saw them coming, they'd just turn around and come back. Okay? You couldn't believe the conditions some of those B-17s come back. Terrible conditions. Because when those shells explode, it's full of shrapnel. And you know how the skin on a B-17 is the size of my shirt here. It's nothing. Anyway, when we get back to Schweinfurt, there was one kid, he had to be from a B-17. I don't know what his position was, but most of the prisoners were former Air Force personnel. Because you got to remember, those that were on the ground force, the war started for them on June 6th, the day of the invasion. Now that's June, but then the following May, the war was over. So a buddy of mine George McMahon, he was captured at the Battle of the Bulge. But these guys weren't prisoners long. But the Air Force personnel, some of them were prisoners for 4 years, 42, 43, 44, 43 years. And this kid weighed about 80 pounds. He was so thin, I put a cardboard box over him, put the blanket over him. He couldn't, the weight of the thing was that bad for him. And that's how thin some of these guys were. And then after we flew them out, because I had a lot of points, they rotated American soldiers home on points. I had 128 points, which is a lot, because I had battle stars for the air offensive over Europe, Normandy, and the Rhineland. And then our unit also got a presidential citation, which we got. So I had a lot of points. Well, all of these guys that, because the infantry guys and artillery, they weren't there when I got there in 43. It was all Air Force personnel. So these guys didn't get there to the end of 43, 44 for the invasion. And so anyway, if they were captured, the most they'd be captured maybe 5 months, okay, 4 months. And so we got all the old prisoners that were some of the British flyers and all would go back to the African campaign, and they were prisoners for maybe 6 years or more. So, and they couldn't even feed the German people. How are they going to feed the prisoners? Okay. Then when all of that ended, I had to guard POWs, and there was a kid, 18 years old, from Dusseldorf, and between my bad German and his lousy English, I let him sit down next to me. These are true stories I'm telling you. He sat down and made the other guys work. I got hell from the colonel for letting the POWs talk to the Fraulines, you know? So I climbed up on the 6x6 and I'm yelling at the guys in English, and they don't know for nothing. I told them to shut their mouth. So I got down and I sat with the German kid. The German kid from Dusseldorf, he says, "How come you were in the army?" I said, "Because they told me to go in the army." I said, "How come you were in the army?" He said, "Because I had to." And he said to me, he says, "If I run away, would you shoot?" Well, I had a 45 on my hip. I took it out and cocked it. I said, "Start running." He laughed and I laughed. I put the gun back in my holster. That's some of the funny things that went on. After that, it was December before I got to come home. So that's May, June, July, August, September, October, November, at least 6 months. So I got a medal for occupation duty. So anyway, they took us to France, to Marseille, France. We were up on a high mountain. They put us in a tent and it was all rock. And I had a big hole in it. And it snowed like hell to come through that hole. We had a potbelly stove and no wood to burn, but we had we had, I guess, kerosene. So we pour it in the stove, light it, burn like hell, turn red, and heat the place for maybe 5 minutes, and then it was out. We'd have to pour more kerosene in there. We had no wood. I don't know whether we were there a day or two, but we went from that mountaintop down a road, and geez, you look down, no fence, nothing. God, the truck ever went off. It was unreal. So we got down to Marseille, France, which is a Gulf coast on the Mediterranean, and we got on a Liberty ship to come home. The Liberty ship, had a hole, and they had the 2x8s across with a canvas over it, okay? And they used to bring tanks and weapons of war. Now they were taking us home, and we're sailing out the Mediterranean. And I'm laying there in my shorts and underclothes, you know. The sun was beautiful. I'm looking at the coast of Spain and seeing the sheep up on the mountain. Oh, God, this was great. It was December. So we passed through the Straits of Gibraltar, where uh, where Europe was here and Africa was here. You could see them both. It was then we got out into the ocean, and it was hell. We're on a Liberty ship. It gets about 6 knots. We got out there. The waves would come over that boat, and I got to describe this to you. The boat would be up on a wave, and the screws would be out of the water going like this, making a hell of a noise. And then the boat would come down, hit a wave like that, and it would stop and shake like hell. And the water's pouring in. Well, we're out somewhere in the middle that's still going on, and we're doing about 6 knots. And we got it. The captain was American, but the crew was all Scandinavian. They're used to this stuff, not me. You go to the bathroom and you end up on the floor. you let you hang on. So anyway, we got a radio message that they were bringing troops home on the aircraft carrier and battleship Washington. I couldn't believe it. The aircraft carrier had its flight deck caved in because of the storm. They turned around, went back to Le Havre. The battleship Washington had its superstructure weakened. That turned around. And here we are out in a stinking little Liberty ship. It took us a month to get home. You're doing 6 knots. When we got into Norfolk, Virginia.
Just let it go.
Yeah, Norfolk, Virginia. I think there, out of 500 guys, I think maybe 25 of us walked off, all the rest went. But during that storm, the guy that was supposed to steer the ship, I don't know what they call him, but he fell against the emergency button, meaning abandoned ship. So anyway, the door kept flopping back and off, and there was 2 feet of water there. The poor guy on the bunk down below, the water was whipping at his backside all the time. He was too sick to get out of his thing, so I grabbed his life jacket, and I'm running up the thing, and the captain gets on the PA system. Stay where you are, stay where you are, everything's okay. You know, I don't know, if I jumped out, the waves wouldn't have lasted 5 seconds, for God's sake. So when we got into Norfolk, out of 500 guys, I think 25 of us walked off that ship. And then from there, I got home up at Camp Devens, where I got my discharge on January 6, 1946. And that's my story for World War II. Some of it humorous, some of it damn scary. And I got it in my book, and the other guys got their stories. I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'm just curious, did you stay in touch with anyone after the war? People that you served with? Did you stay in touch with people?
They're all dead and gone. I mean, look at Meriden. All I know is 3. I only know 3 World War II vets, and Meriden's still alive. There's Dick Egan, who was in the Battle of the Bulge, Henry Musinski, and I think he was in the Glider group, and me. That's how I know it was left. And that's out of 5,000 guys that went from Meriden. And there's a kid from South Meriden that died in Nancy, France, when I was there. And he was, what the hell? We were all 18, 19 years old. If a guy was 25, 26, he was an old man. The officers, I met one general, General Kepner, when I was in very secret headquarters where they drew up missions. Okay, and I was there, and General Kepner come in, and I met him. Hell of a nice guy. I'll tell you, I didn't know. I liked the officers I had. They were terrific guys. I and what do I think of the service? If I had my way, everybody that turns 18 should put in 3 years of service and then go on to college and get the best education they can, because the service can do a lot for you if you're willing to learn and just say, yes, sir, salute, and do your job. All I did is what I was told to do, and that's it. I got along fine. I enjoyed it was an education. As a matter of fact, the school I went to, I became fire marshal here in Meriden. And when I was in college, I was studying business and no, Dr. McGrath, who was superintendent of schools here, he said to me, we were friends. He said, Bill, get yourself, go back in college. My wife, who was at the university, kept after me, Bill, please go back. So I finally did. So Dr. McGrath said, Bill, be a teacher. I said, okay. So I studied history up at Central. And I got to tell you this story. When I was at Central, I told you I could never pass a true or false test. But when I had world history, the first semester they had a true or false, and I couldn't pass it. So he talked to me about it. He said, Bill, are these your answers, or did you look around? I did the best I could. He said, well, we'll have a written test. Well, the second semester, I took it again, and he had a thing where we were to do some paperwork. Well, I wrote a story,
Really nice.
and I must have impressed him. I don't know what I wrote, but he said, Bill, and this is in front of the class. He said, Bill, this is the best story I ever read on a college level. And he gave me an A. So I passed the course in a breeze. And if I had a written test in college, I can't ever remember getting anything less than an A. But boy, would I argue with those teachers if I thought they were wrong. And I tell them some stories, and I didn't reach them. They didn't think I was so great. Well, what the hell? You got to remember, when I went back to school, I was 30 years old. The other kids are 19, 20, 21 years old. You know, everything the teacher told them, they took it for gospel. I didn't. So anyway, that's about all I can tell you, except that I enjoyed my tenure. I also went to Middlesex. Oh, I'll tell you another thing. When I was studying, and I became fire marshal in chief in Meriden, I changed my course to administration. And I also, because I knew drawings and everything, I took I had 2 years of law, business and corporate law. So I had to deal with the law a lot in Meriden. And I had a lot of power. I had a power of arrest. And I only arrested about 8 people, and I hated doing that. Well, one guy I arrested was a multimillionaire, and I'm not going to go into it beyond that, except to say they thought I was wrong. They got a lawyer, and they sued the city and me for $1 million. Well, it got up in the federal court in Hartford. I spent a week on the stand, and it was a jury trial. Well, believe it or not, we won. I was right and they were wrong. And I don't blame the guy I had to arrest. I liked his dad. It was a good family. And if I had to arrest anybody, it wouldn't have been him. It would have been whoever advised them to do what they shouldn't have done. And that's who I would have arrested. But when I had business in corporate law, everything that I did as fire marshal had to do with legal stuff, and I knew what I was doing. And I'll tell you one final thing. I was the first legitimate fire marshal the city of Meriden ever had. Prior to me, the fire marshal was the building inspector and fire marshal. And the mayor called me in one day, and I was stationed at Engine 3. And he says, Bill, I'd like you to take the job as fire marshal. I says, Mayor, why me? There's a dozen guys that would want the job. I don't want it. Apparently, he looked at my background. He says, well, I want you. I says, Mayor, let me tell you, you got the wrong guy if you think that I got to do what's right. And he says, if you said anything else, I wouldn't want you. I said, we understand each other then. I said, you know, there was no office, no car, no paperwork, nothing. I started out from scratch. He said, well, I'm on an austerity program. I said, I'm sorry, Mayor, but I'm not going to use a family car. So I said, well, you turn in police cars. Give me the best police car you're turning in, I'll use that for starters. I didn't have an office. I had to I'd come home and here on my typewriter here at home and do work to make up the stuff. And I had to build a whole file on buildings here in the city of Meriden. And I worked alone for 4 or 5 years before I got any help. Fortunately, I knew how to type and I was very good at writing. So everything worked out well, except for one time. The woman that had the library board asked me to inspect the library, which was the old building across from City Hall, and I condemned it. Oh, the mayor called me in. He was fit to be tied. It was wintertime. It was snowing like all get out. Must have been 4 feet of snow. He said to me, he says, Bill, you know what that's going to cost me to do what you're asking? I says, I'm sorry, Mayor. I told you in the beginning that I could only do the job one way. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll quit the job. You put me back on an engine company. You can call the newspaper, tell them anything you want, and they call me, I'll back you up. And he said, you're serious, aren't you? I said, I am. He said, damn it, I'll do the repairs, and it's going to cost $86,000. He said, Bill, you see the snow out there? God put it there. God can take it away. I said, Mayor, that's your problem. I got my own now.
Hi. Did you want to ask him anything else? If not, I mean, if you think we're done, it's fine. But I kind of wanted to hear from him why he's doing this, because he's very passionate about why he's doing this.
Yeah, well, the question I like to always,
Look, I'm a corn.
always like to ask.
I love my country. I love my city. And the school system I was raised in was the best school system any young man could ever go to. When I grew up in this town, I loved it and the people in it.
Still does, and he still does. She wants to ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I always like to ask the veterans we interview is what do you want anyone watching your interview in the future to know? What's one thing that you would like to leave them with after watching this?
Love your country, love your flag, respect it, and do the best you can. And if you're called into service, accept it, do the best you can, but above all, love the greatest country you were ever lucky enough to be born in. Okay?
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us and share your story.
I got news for you. the fact that you guys are connected with Central, I couldn't have liked it better.
Yeah,
Because of my experience in Central.
yeah. And here's how thick the book is.
Oh, wow.
If you guys get a chance to look at it, you'll love it.
And
Oh,
so-
Me too.
And listen,
Oh, I stepped on the dog.
a lot of my speeches are in there, okay, that I gave on Memorial Day, Veterans Day. You'll find they're well-written because otherwise the Record or Journal wouldn't have printed them as editorials. And you'll find that I'm very passionate about this country, about this flag, and about the bald eagles I see parked outside my house around here. This is the best, this is the most greatest country God ever created.
Bill, they may be able to come, I don't know, to the event next week when we unveil your flag.
Is that what that's all about?
Yeah,
Oh, I never even knew.
I'll get you. And I will update you on the date and time of that. If you can't come, understood completely. But it's amazing.
I showed Kathy my paintings.
Oh,
I'm no real artist, but I like them.
they're
And
beautiful.
I painted a flag, the American flag,
Mhm.
and I superimposed it over the flag, a bald eagle. Okay? I thought it looked great. I presented it I went up to City Hall and I showed the mayor's secretary the flag. She loved it. But before I get into that, I belong to many veterans group. When I finished it, I took a veterans group. There was probably 40, 50 guys there from World War II, and they clapped like heck. Gee, that's great. I didn't expect them to clap, you know. So when I took it up to City Hall, the secretary said, geez, that's great. I says, well, ask the mayor if he wants it. He can hang it up in his office or something. Preferably if you hang it in the hallway where people can see it. I had lettering on the bottom. And I'm not sure what I wrote. So many years ago, I had one country, one flag, one language, I think. I don't even remember. But I thought the thing looked great. And then when I went back, this must be, God, 8, 9 years ago, I could never see the flag anywhere. So I asked Kathy one day to see if she could find it. If they didn't want it, I'd take it back and give it to somebody that wanted it. Like I didn't want it in some closet somewhere. It's I was proud of it. Maybe they didn't think it was good enough. If that was the way they felt, I'm not a professional artist. I did a painting of my wife when she was alive, oil painting. When I brought it home and showed her, she cried. It was I thought it was a pretty good picture I did. And I showed Kathy the pictures I've done. She liked them, but there are artists that would do much better than me, believe me. I'm not that great, but what I do, I like. Oh, let me tell you one other true story. I gave a lot of them away, okay? And this one I gave to a doctor, a medical doctor, friend of mine. I said, Doc, would you like this picture? I said, you can hang it in your office if you like it. He said, yeah, Bill, I like it. So he took it home and showed his wife. She says, you can't have it. She hung it in her living room.
That's what we're gonna unveil next week, is we're gonna put that on the wall, because it's been in the basement. And we're gonna put it on the wall and unveil it and surprise him when he sees it up there. And it has so much love for his country, and I've never seen anything like it.
Wonderful.
I didn't mean to interfere. You can edit me out.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Is there
Well,
anything else you need?
I'm
from
going
me?
to stop recording.
Okay,
Oh,
Did
I
I
was going to say, I'm
help
going to
you?
stop recording now.
they're stopping
I'm
recording.
sorry?
Did I help you people?
Absolutely. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
I'll send you the paperwork that is
Happy to
signed.
do it.
And
God